Yes, I'm gonna do it.
That's cool.
Yeah. I've been in about time.
And Judy, so many people. I haven't seen them. Well, I was gone most of December.
Oh, where were you?
Well, I was away for Sundays for the show. And the first Sunday, I think I was singing it with the radio. And then on the 24th, so I missed all this.
Oh, I see. Yeah, been quite a while.
Right. Yeah, so I see people, and of course, New Year's, it's a little sparser.
That makes sense. Yeah.
One singer, she's a singer.
That sucks.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, great to see you.
Yeah, but she was hoping to.
It is already,
Pardon?
Yeah, I think she was hoping to sing. Well, I think something.
when she's giving us her message.
Israel. Oh, you're Thanksgiving? He might be waiting for me. No, he's not. He's there. Yep. Maybe they don't. I don't think we got it.
We did.
We did. Oh, I wasn't late.
Yeah. We went to Turkey the other night. Yeah. We did. No, 2 weeks
Yes, I was some visitors. Who is that?
That's Emily.
Oh, Emily. Yes, of course. So she's not here from hours.
She's He's a chef.
He's a chef.
Thank you, Beth. That was beautiful. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone here in person and as well online. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Cindy Steele, and I am your service leader today. UUFDC envisions a world empowered by reason, compassion, and love. And within these values and beyond, we are so happy that you are here. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us. It is our custom to invite guests or people who haven't been here for a while to introduce themselves. Is there anyone who would care to stand and introduce yourself if you haven't been here before? Go. Yes? Yes. Yeah, I know you. Stand up.
Hello, my name is Emily Colton, and it's been a very long time since I've been here. Katie Dahl invited me, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Emily. It's nice to see you. Thank you. Anyone else like to introduce themselves? Okay, thank you. Thank you all, and I'm glad that you're here. Now, let's all, Katie and I discussed this a moment ago, let's all just silence our devices together. Okay, so if we hear that wonderful cascade of sound that goes on, we'll all do that together. Thank you. Now, if you have questions about UUFDC or Unitarian Universalism in general, please speak to the people at our welcome table. They will be happy to answer any of your questions. And also, please sign our guest book so that we can send you our newsletter. After the service, please cross the foyer into the gathering room and enjoy some tea, coffee, and some goodies, along with the wonderful conversation that happens there. But then a few minutes after that, you'll hear some chimes, and which invite you back into this room. And please come to this side of this room, and we will have a discussion with our wonderful speaker, Katie Dahl. So it is the moment now that I am lucky enough to introduce our wonderful Katie Dahl, singer, songwriter, poet, playwright, Renaissance woman. Her CV is on the front of the order of service, and while it's fun to talk about her plays at Northern Sky Theater, my favorite being Victory Farm, and the many concerts we all have heard, here is something you might not know about Katie. She has served on the Northern Sky Board of Trustees for around 10 years, and what a joy it was to serve with her. In addition to her creative artistic ideas, Katie also understands the business aspects of the organization, and she adds creativity to what can sometimes be very mundane. For anybody who served on any board, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Katie is one of the best symphonic thinkers I have ever known, and thank you, Katie, for speaking for us. Now, let me draw your attention to the announcements on the back of the order of service. And there's information there. And if you have any announcements that pertain to this fellowship, Hank will be happy to bring you the microphone. And yes, just raise your hand here for Carol.
Okay. This is an announcement that it's a joy, but also concern. It's a joy for Beth because she's going to be leaving us to study for 6 months, which is the concern. So we won't be hearing from her for a while. So after the service, be sure to stop and talk to her. and let her know how much we all appreciate what she does for us.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, we value you. Yes. Any other announcements about the congregation? We have one. Beth has her own.
A little bit about the music today. Katie and I have been in touch, and it's always nice to have the input from the speaker. And so two of the pieces that you're hearing today are actually favorites of Eleanor Roosevelt, who's going to be the subject of Katie's conversation. So the opening, Shall We Gather at the River, was a favorite hymn of hers, and Bright in the Corner is also one of her favorite hymns. The final piece, High Hopes, was FDR's tag song for one of his reelection campaigns. So that felt fitting as a close. And the nearness of you just really felt like it speaks to the love between Eleanor and Hicks. So.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other announcements? That was easy. Thanks, Hank. It is our practice on the first Sunday of every month to illuminate one of the 7 principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association. And today I decided to illuminate 2 of them, the 2nd principles and the 6th principle. And they are, I will read them. We affirm and promote, number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. It's interesting to me that after living with and working to observe our 7 principles, I think for about 39 years now, is how long we've had them, they have all begun to say the same thing to me. Love people. It's just that easy. So it's interesting how dismayed I sometimes feel. We as a country were closer to these goals a few years ago, in my opinion. My values have not changed, and in fact, I have deepened my commitment to them. So I ask, how do we move toward them again? Right now, I have many more questions for which I do not have answers. The quandary deepens with my commitment, so I live with hope and gratitude for the concepts that, to me, continue to bring people together, even if we differ. Thank you. So I will start the service with our chalice lighting and opening words. And sometimes when I move at the edge of a greatness, a lake or a sea or a mountainside, comes a love so enormous, I can love anyone, even myself. Now, please turn to this hymn in the insert of your order of service. It's called Brighten the Corner Where You Are. Now, Katie picked this hymn because it was Eleanor Roosevelt's favorite hymn. Now, because it's unfamiliar and the language is a little bit dated, I'm going to read the 3 verses out loud for you so you get a little familiarity with the verses. So the first verse is, do not wait until some deed of greatness you may do. Do not wait to shed your lights afar. To the many duties ever near you now be true. Brighten the corner where you are. It's a very uplifting hymn. Just above our clouded skies that you may help to clear. Let not narrow self your way debar. Though into one heart alone may fall your song of cheer. Brighten the corner where you are. And the third verse. Here for all your talent you may surely find a need. Here reflect the bright and morning star. Even from your humble hand the bread of life may feed. Brighten the corner where you are. And in the middle of the refrain, which is right in the corner where you are, there's a line that says, "Someone far from harbor, you may guide across the bar." So those are all the words to the hymn. Now, Beth is going to play it through once, and so we can stand and sing. Okay. Do not wait until the deed of greatness you may do. Do not wait to shed your light afar. To the many duties ever near you now be true. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Someone far from harbor you may guide across the bar. Brighten the corner where you are. Just above our clouded skies that you may help to clear. Let not narrow self your way depart. Though into the heart alone may fall your song of cheer. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Someone far from harbor you may guide across the bar. Brighten the corner where you are. Here for all your talents you may surely find a need. Here reflect the bright and morning star. Even from your humble hand the bread of life may feed. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Brighten the corner where you are. Someone far from harbor you may guide across the bar. Brighten the corner where you are. Now, please stay standing as you wish and are able for the unison affirmation and doxology, which are both in the order of service. So please stay with me. We gathered together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within the caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace on heaven, earth be sung, in every land, by every tongue. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, this morning, you might be feeling a joy that by sharing could lift us all up, or perhaps you're weighted with a concern, and sharing it might help remove the weight because we will share it with you. So if you have a joy or concern, Hank will bring the microphone around, but please keep in mind that the service is live streamed and it is saved on the internet. So Don't share about another person unless you have their specific permission to do so. Thank you. Are there any joys and concerns? Yes. Lynn?
Lindleys, most of you, some of you have known Ellie Kagi, who was a member for quite a while. Several years ago, moved to Illinois to be near her children. And she passed away in December. So keep Ellie's family in your thoughts.
Thank you, Lynn.
I had a joy this past week, Vicki Ash. I stopped in to the gallery at TAP and saw the wonderful collection, part of the wonderful collection of Buttons and Hank of the holiday greetings from the White House. And it's amazing how one little gallery with maybe 20, I don't know, 25, 14, seemed like more. It was very educational and a lot of fun. And how long is it going to be up there? Oh, I'm sorry. It was well worthwhile. Thank you, Hank.
Are there any other joys and concerns? Go ahead.
So Carol sort of preempted me, which is fine, and I thank her for her words. But I will be gone for about 6 months, so it will be hard to be away from here and away from Door County. But I'll be out in Sedona, Arizona, doing a massage school training. So that's the joy, and I'll carry thoughts of all of you with me.
Thank you. You will be missed.
Yes,
Thank you. Any other joys and concerns?
rubs us the wrong way.
Got a concern.
You know, you just got to love him.
Yes, you do.
Any other joys and concerns? Don't be afraid. He won't comment every time. I think that's it. Thank you, Hank. Thank you. We do good work here at the fellowship through all the years that we've been here with our various means of outreach, and as well as our 52 services a year. We are here for everybody to come and share our 7 principles and our watchwords. So I ask that you be generous in the offertory today, and offerings can also be made online at uufdc.org. Thank you. For our moment of quiet, let us center our thoughts and spirits into this space of peace, quiet, and openness. And now, Katie Dahl.
Good morning, everybody. I told my partner Rich this morning, I love speaking at the UU so much. And if I did it more often, I would just have to like give up the rest of my life because I spend so much time thinking about what I'm going to say. So one of the first pieces of musical theater that I ever fell in love with was a show called Northern Lights at what was then called American Folklore Theater, now Northern Sky Theater, written by Fred Alley and James Kaplan. I saw it when I was 10, and it's a musical just right for a 10-year-old. It's about like work and failure and shame. And when I was 10, what I really like connected with was a song called White Bird that some of you might have heard. And it's a song that is about one of the characters imagining she was a white bird. And in this song, she sort of sheds her shame. And the song is literally about a character imagining she is a white bird. And it is about bigger things like love and shame and all these these big things that are contained in the details of a very specific image. It is both things. So just keep that in mind. And partly because like plays like Northern Lights and plays like Everything meant so much to me as a little kid. When I discovered that my amazing career of touring singer-songwriter was not always like a super lucrative one, I turned to the real moneymaker in the world, which is of course the musical theater. So I thought if I could write plays, then I would. There's my job security. So I have written co-written two musicals so far. One, Victory Farm, I co-wrote with Emily Colson and James Valk, and one called The Fisherman's Daughters will be done at Northern Sky this summer that you can go see. And now I'm working on four more. And the reason the thing about starting a new musical is like it is seriously the worst. Like starting the musical, you know how when you do a crossword, like you start and like it's sort of painful. There's all these blanks and you don't know what you're doing. And as you go, it gets easier and easier because there's more of the words are filled in, and you're just having to fill in like little individual squares rather than everything. That's how writing a musical is. You start with like the horror of the blank page, and there's only you and your, assumed failure to come. And then like as you get closer, there's audiences and there's costumes and lights and people clap, and even if they don't like it, they clap. And so so then you start to forget, like you start to just think this is fun. And it's just like when you start another crossword, like you're like, that was fun. And then you start like, oh, so it's like childbirth, right? Like the children are cute. And then you forget like, oh, that was terrible. So you do it again. So anyway, this happened to me last spring, and I got this idea.
I forgot about how bad it was to start, and I got this idea for another musical. And I am more hooked on that musical idea now than I have ever been hooked on any idea before. And I will talk to anyone who will listen at great length about this story. I'm sorry if you have been if I've cornered you, but today you're all cornered. This is too a story about love and shame and work. And it's about the secrets we keep and the private arrangements that we make between ourselves and the world. It's called The Northeast Corner. So before I tell you what it's about, though you may have guessed, let's just cover like what does a musical need? I mean, it needs a lot of things, plot, songs, whatever. But for our purposes today, I'm going to talk about two main things. First, it needs deep feelings. So you need three-dimensional characters who have real feelings that talking is not enough to communicate, right? So like I grew up the kid of a therapist, and I used to sit, my mom was a therapist, and I used to sit at her receptionist's desk when my mom was in session, and people would come into the sessions and they would look fine. They looked normal. And then they would leave the sessions and they would be like weeping and goopy and teary. And I would be like, what did she do to them? And but it sort of is when it became apparent to me that there are feelings that people have that you don't see on the surface, right? That there's a lot going on for people. I would see these people sometimes in our church or elsewhere, and I'd be like, they seem fine again. And so I learned that like, oh, people have feelings that they can't talk about. And that's where the musical theater comes in, because when you can no longer speak, you sing. And sometimes there's dancing also. And like I said, people clap. So it's good. So that's the first thing you need, big, deep feelings. Second thing is you need a main character. You need a protagonist. And ideally, this protagonist sort of affects his or her fate through their own choices. So they need to have a goal, even if they don't know they have a goal. They need a sort of a quest, and they need to make their quest happen. It can't like happen to them. That's not interesting to watch. You need to watch them create their own reality. So like in The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy wants to get home, right? It doesn't have to be a big fancy fate, but we need people to have a goal. Tevye in the Fiddler on the Roof wants to like maintain tradition, right? That's his goal. Okay, let's bear those in mind, and we'll talk about my new musical. You go first. No. In 1932, while she was on the campaign trail with her husband Franklin, Eleanor Roosevelt fell in love with someone who was not her husband Franklin. And this was not particularly problematic in the case of the Roosevelts' marriage. In 1918, Franklin had an affair with Eleanor's secretary, and Eleanor wanted a divorce, wasn't able to get one because of the sort of, culture of the time. And but they decided together, collectively, that their relationship was no longer a physical and romantic one. It was a political partnership, and that's all it was. And they were free to have their own social and romantic lives. And they had they were fine with that. They were it was a kind of amazing modern arrangement that they had come to. So it wasn't that surprising that Eleanor had fallen in love with someone other than Franklin. But it was perhaps surprising that the person that Eleanor fell in love with was a reporter who was assigned to cover her, and maybe even more surprising that was a woman. Lorena Hickok was the first woman with a byline on the front page of the New York Times. She grew up a Wisconsin butter maker's daughter, and in 1933, she found herself in the White House as the live-in lover of the First Lady of the United States. So, how did that happen? The easiest thing to say I've found when I'm trying to corner someone into listening to me talk about this is that I'm writing a musical about Eleanor Roosevelt because she's famous. She's the one people know. But the truer thing to say is that I'm writing a musical about Lorena Hickok. She's my protagonist, and Eleanor Roosevelt is also a fairly important character. So Lorena Hickok was born in 1893 in East Troy, Wisconsin. Like I said, the daughter of a butter maker, and her father was a violent man. He terrorized her as a child, did horrible things to her that I won't go into, and moved the family around from Wisconsin to Illinois to South Dakota. And Hick's mom died when she was 13, and her new stepmother kicked Hick out of the house. So as a 14-year-old, she found herself on the streets, such as it is, except for that she was in rural South Dakota. So she took a series of jobs as a domestic servant in different people's homes. And she always felt like an outsider. Moving around like that and having to work like that outside the house doesn't help you make friends. And just her nature was sort of different than everyone else's. She was a foot taller than the rest of her peers. She spoke about an octave lower than the rest of her peers. She just wasn't like everyone else, and she felt out of place. But she was academically successful despite all of these circumstances, and she eventually attended Lawrence College in Appleton, and she dropped out both times. She attended twice. She dropped out twice. She never felt like she fit in. But what her childhood gave her was this really deep sense of curiosity and empathy and identification with people who didn't have prestige or power or beauty. And those qualities eventually are what endeared her to Eleanor Roosevelt. But first, they made her a great journalist. So in the early part of the 20th century, journalism was a very male-dominated field, right? And women reporters pretty much wrote for the society pages. And Hick hated that. That was not what she was interested in. She wanted to write hard news. And the way that she got to do that was by working harder and longer and better than all of her colleagues, male and female. And she learned to smoke cigars and drink bourbon on the rocks and play poker for her all night long shifts in the newsroom that she took in order to get ahead. And so she worked her way up from the Appleton Crescent to the Milwaukee Sentinel to the Minneapolis Tribune to the New York Daily Mirror and eventually to the Associated Press, where in 1928, like I said, she became the first woman to have her byline on the front page of the New York Times. And in 1932, she was the reporter, not just the woman reporter, but the reporter that the Associated Press assigned to cover the Lindbergh kidnapping. So it gives you a sense of just her importance in the world of journalism. And in that work, she found a sense of identity and value that she had never had as a kid, right? She didn't get that from her parents. She didn't get that from her peers. Suddenly, as a journalist, she found herself and she saw her value reflected back to her from other people. She knew she was good. And she knew what her gifts were, and she found a way to honor them. She also knew and honored herself when it came to her love life. She sought the romantic company of women her entire life in an era when that was a fraught decision. She lived for 8 years in Minneapolis with her partner, fellow journalist Ellie Morse, before she moved to New York. And after her relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt ended, she found love again with a judge named Marion Herron. So Hick was a woman who consistently determined her own path, not only in love, but in work. Eleanor Roosevelt. So in some ways, Eleanor Roosevelt is really different than Hick. She was 9 years older than Hick. She was married. She was wealthy. And she was a proper American aristocrat. If you've ever heard of a recording of her speak, she has this, she has a very high voice and a mid-Atlantic accent, and she's very proper. And she spent her teenage years going to boarding school in England while Hick was was scrabbling her way together through the domestic servant jobs. And Eleanor descended literally from a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Hick may have had a distant relative who was Wild Bill Hickok. We don't know. So this is the difference in their lineage, right? But what they shared was this common background of sadness. So Eleanor Roosevelt lost both of her parents and a brother by the time she was 10. But even when they were alive, the family was unhappy. Her dad was deeply addicted to alcohol. Her mom was cold and critical and distant. Eleanor, who I personally think was beautiful, but who had large sort of protruding teeth and was 6 feet tall, thought of herself as an ugly duckling and was constantly encouraged to think of herself that way by her mom and grandma, who eventually raised her. So she had deep sadnesses that her whole life she worked to conceal. And she grew up starved for affirmation and love. And then she got married, and then her husband had an affair, and she was just confirmed in her beliefs of, that she didn't deserve those things. But like Hick, when her life fell apart, Eleanor turned to creating her own identity. So when the romantic part of her marriage ended, Eleanor threw herself into activist work and teaching. She campaigned for just labor laws and for women's suffrage. And in doing that, she came upon the lesbian community of Greenwich Village in New York City. She developed a social network full of women who wore pants and made furniture and wrote philosophical tracts and lived with one another. And with one of her couple friends, Nan Cook and Marion Dickerman, Eleanor made a business called Valkill Industries. It was a furniture factory and a printing press, and it existed out of a cottage at the end of the Roosevelt estate that Franklin called the Love Nest. So in the company of these women who loved women, and in the women who loved activism, Eleanor found this new spiritual home that she had sort of never had. She had never had a home that felt safe to her. And so when Franklin decided to run for first governor of New York and then president, Eleanor was devastated because she had an uncle, Theodore Roosevelt, who had been president. She saw what the White House did to the women who inhabited it. It chewed them up. And she feared that she would lose herself. So this is where my musical starts, where they meet on the Roosevelt campaign trail in 1932. So up to this point, right, they've both defied the odds, and neither of them has the rags to riches story because Eleanor didn't come from rags and Hick never got rich. But they both have a rags to riches story in the emotional sense. I think they came from nothing. They made through like trust in themselves and sort of sheer will. They made emotional lives and love that they were proud of. So when they were thrown together in 1932 by circumstance, they were both sort of more fulfilled than they had ever been, but they both thought they sort of thought opposite things about their future trajectories, right? Eleanor thought she was doomed because of this White House run that her husband was making. Hick seemed to be on a constant path up. Her career in journalism was going great. Then they fell in love, and it changed everything for both of them forever. So we still all together? You with me? Yeah, okay. So far, everything's good for a musical, right? They've got some deep feelings they can't talk about, and these women are good at fighting for their own destinies, and they're agents of their own lives, so all good for the musical. So here's what happens. They're on the Roosevelt campaign train. Hick is assigned to cover Eleanor. Hick tells her editor, she's amazing. We better cover her. And he's like, we've never covered a wife before. And she's like, no, but she's special. We should cover her. And the editor's like, great, you do it. And she's like, no, I don't want to cover the woman. Like, like the whole point, she's like, she does not want to be pigeonholed as a women's reporter. But the woman they did assign to cover her, because of course they assigned a woman to cover the woman who did get assigned to cover her left on maternity leave. So there's Hick. She's like, oh, okay, fine, cover her. Suddenly, there is a deep chemistry between them. Eleanor starts picking Hick out of the press scrums, being like, why don't you come with me to the, on this little outing through the Iowa cornfield? Like, why don't you come with me to Albuquerque to visit my friend? And suddenly they're doing everything together. They had a deep chemistry that was physical, but they also understood one another's sadness. And I think that was at the base of their connection. So suddenly two women who had always felt unattractive were attractive to each other, and they knew that. Two women who had felt misunderstood felt seen by each other. And I think game recognizes game. And I think they both saw like, oh, she works really hard for what she wants. I do that. I think they saw that in each other. And they also appreciated what was different about each other. So Hick admired Eleanor's elegance and her stamina and her sense of humor. And Eleanor loved Hick's laugh, which was reportedly contagious, and her intelligence and her spontaneity and her shrewdness about the political system. So this part of the play where they fall in love will be very fun to write. I'm excited about that part. And they will find, they want this love, and they find their way to get it, and it's all good. And they beat societal expectations to, choose each other. And it was great. So there's only one problem. And that is that as the relationship deepened, Hick can't really do her job anymore, right? She is no longer a neutral observer of this person that she has been assigned to cover. Her editors know that she has developed a close relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt, and that's great because it's the better to get the information. And they press her for information. Like one of the Roosevelt children is having a marriage breakup, and they're like, tell us about that. Again and again, Hick demurs. She demurs. She just deceives. She turns away from her journalistic duty to to report on what she knows in favor of protecting the woman that she increasingly is in love with. So she has built this career by seeking scoops, by hunting for a byline and putting that priority above all else. Suddenly, Eleanor has taken the place of what she wants the most in the world. So her quest as a protagonist has changed, and this is really screwing with my story structure as a playwright. So, for a few months, like, the sacrifice is worth it to her. Eleanor is despairing, and her only solace is in Hick. And between the election and the inauguration, so November 1932 and March 1933, they spent almost all their time together, either at Hick's apartment in New York City or with Eleanor's activist friends in Greenwich Village. And Hick is like kind of trying to balance love and work, and it's getting harder. But on the eve of the inauguration, everything changes. And this is the end of Act 1. So Eleanor and Hick spent the night before the inauguration alone together in the presidential suite of the Mayflower Hotel. It's factually true. Franklin stayed in the room down the hall with his mistress, Missy LeHand, who was his secretary. The country was in deep crisis. It was the depths of the Depression. Banks were closing. There had been a sort of recent mini crisis within the greater crisis that the inauguration was coming onto. And Franklin knew he had to rise to the moment for this inauguration. So he sent over his inauguration speech. You may have heard of it. There's the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? He sent this over to Eleanor's room to read and get feedback on. Eleanor read it out loud to Hick. 30 years later, Hick wrote this: "There I was, right in the middle of what that night was the biggest story in the world, and I did nothing about it. I could have slipped out to a telephone after she read the inaugural address to me, could have given the AP the gist of it with a few quotations. If I had, it would have been the biggest scoop of my career." This is the moment, I think, when Hick was entirely transferred her loyalty to Eleanor. And she gave up her first love, journalism, and she never got to go back to it. By July, she had quit her job at the Associated Press entirely, realizing she could no longer claim to be a journalist with any integrity, and she never worked as a journalist again. So what she did was she threw her energies into helping Eleanor reimagine the role of First Lady. She moved into the White House at Eleanor's invitation. She suggested that Eleanor hold press conferences for women reporters only, which not only gave Eleanor a direct, she was the first lady to have a direct mouthpiece to the press rather than having to speak through her husband. So that it helped Eleanor's image, but it also forced newspapers to hire women reporters, which was one of Hick's goals. She really became the woman behind the woman, is what some people call her. She really was the way that Eleanor changed the idea of what the First Lady could be. She encouraged her to write a daily syndicated newspaper column called My Day, which Eleanor wrote for most of the rest of her life every day. She consistently helped Eleanor to understand the working class that Hick was from and Eleanor was not, which was vitally important at this time when everyone's working on the New Deal. And Eleanor passed that information along to Franklin. And she provided Eleanor with unflagging emotional support. Scholar Roger Streitmatter writes, "Never before and never again would Eleanor, despite her social stature and her myriad accomplishments, feel that sense of being loved exclusively. On the strength of Hick's love, Eleanor blossomed and thrived, grew and flourished, took flight." In this time, the women wrote more than 2,000 letters to each other. They carved the path of their love intentionally and at great risk to themselves. Certain historians, horrified at the notion that Eleanor Roosevelt was queer, have gone out of their way to insist that the relationship between Eleanor and Hick was a schoolgirl crush. That lines like, "I long to lie down beside you and hold you in my arms," don't reflect a physical connection. "I couldn't kiss you tonight, so I kissed your picture instead." Eleanor Roosevelt biographer Blanche Wiesen Cook scoffs at this notion, reaffirming the women's sense of agency. She said, they were neither saints, adolescents, virgins, nor mermaids. Two adult women in the prime of their lives. They knew the score. They appreciated the dangers. They had both experienced pain and loving. Neither thought things would be smooth or easy. They gave each other comfort. They touched each other deeply. They loved profoundly. They moved on. And they did move on. The odds were stacked against them. Theirs was a relationship that needed secrecy and privacy to flourish. And what Franklin did was get reelected again and again and again. And privacy became less and less possible. The same journalists Hick had admired and then surpassed as their colleague became her nemesis, as Hick and Eleanor sought privacy that they could not find. The beginnings of aggressive paparazzi tactics we're starting to see with Eleanor and Hick's relationship. There's a high-speed car chase in San Francisco. In February 1934, Hick wrote to Eleanor, "I'm so fed up with publicity, I want to kick every reporter I see. Why the hell can't they leave me alone?" So she has changed her allegiance completely, right? And she's so frustrated. So I've been trying to write this talk for weeks. I've probably written 15 pages of words that I have not said to you. You're welcome. But this is partly because these women are like fascinating to me. I cannot get enough of them. I've spent a year researching them. I've gone to Hyde Park, New York. I've spent so much time, and I could talk about them for hours. But the other reason that is that I'm struggling to frame the story. I said at the beginning that what every musical needs is a protagonist with a quest and a sense of agency. And the thing is, I'm having a hard time seeing what Hick got. I can really only see what she lost. First, a career that she loved, and then a woman that she loved. Is it enough to know what you have accomplished, to set one dream aside for another, even if both dreams in the end don't turn out how you hoped? Both Eleanor and Hick lost a love that for a time meant everything to them. But in Eleanor's case, her professional accomplishments, her greatest professional accomplishments were yet to come. What about Hick? I believe that what Lorena Hickok wanted throughout her life is to see her own value through the eyes of another. In the first part of her adulthood, she found that in bylines. Every time she saw her name in print, I believe a lonely farm girl from South Dakota finally believed her own value. And then in the next part of her adulthood, she found it in a lover. She saw her value reflected in the eyes of the woman she loved. And then what? It has been tempting for me these past few weeks, as I have realized I really do know enough about these characters to start writing, to want to figure out how it's going to end before I put the pen to paper. And it's hard for me to accept that I don't think that's how it's going to work for me with this project. I have a quote from Madeleine L'Engle hanging above my desk. It says, "Inspiration comes far more often during the work as things get rolling before you sit at the typewriter. This is because the largest part of the job of the artist is to listen to the work and to go where it tells you to go. And this involves faith, letting go of your own control and having faith in something you do not control." As I really buckle down to work on this piece, I see that I've got more questions than I have answers. As I face the blank page, I only know what stirs in me as I read these women's stories. As an ambitious artist, I see myself in Hick's struggle to balance the demands of her career against the pulls of her heart. As a bisexual woman married to a man, I see myself in Eleanor's broad understanding of who she can love and the ways that her straight public persona rubs up against her own inner truths. As a Wisconsinite, I love imagining Hick's transition from a farm girl to a big city reporter. And as a songwriter, when I read these women's letters to each other, I hear them sing. So tomorrow, as I sit down at the blank page to get to work, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to try to see where the work wants me to go. I'm going to try to remember that the biggest, most existential truths are clearest in the smallest and most specific details, like that song from Northern Lights about the white bird. One of my favorite letters from Hick to Eleanor comes from December 5th, 1933. Hick was traveling around the country writing reports about the Depression to help inform FDR's New Deal policy. Here's the first paragraph. "Dear, tonight it's Bemidji, away up in the timber country, not a bad hotel, and one day nearer you. Only 8 more days. 24 hours from now, it will be only 7 more, just a week. I've been trying today to bring back your face, to remember just how you look. Funny how even the dearest face will fade away in time. Most clearly, I remember your eyes with a kind of teasing smile in them, and the feeling of that soft spot just northeast of the corner of your mouth against my lips. I wonder what we'll do when we meet, what we'll say. I'm rather proud of us, aren't you? I think we've done rather well." I am so moved by the idea that Hick, a hard-boiled reporter on the outside, but forever a lonely Midwestern farm girl on the inside, thinks of her lover's face like a South Dakota map with cardinal directions, the northeast corner of your mouth. I can imagine Hick as a kid running to the northeast corner of their farm, trying to take refuge from one of her father's rages. And I can imagine how she finds in Eleanor's face a refuge, a soft spot in a hard land there at the northeast corner. As I begin to work on this piece, I have enormous questions about love and work and patriarchy and privacy and ambition and failure. But I'm going to look at this piece of art as if it were a lover, a place of refuge. I'm going to start at the northeast corner.
Thank you, Katie. That was very moving and powerful. Okay, let's all take a deep breath as we turn to hymn number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. We're going to do 4 of the 6 verses. 1, 2. So we're going to do the first 2, and then 5 and 6, the last 2. Okay, 1, 2, 5, 6. And please play it all the way through. Yes. Please stand. Please stand. Verse 1. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Verse 5. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gay and straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Thank you. Be seated. Years ago, Katie said, I believe here at this pulpit, she said, folk music exists to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. Well, I've remembered that, and I've broadened it in other cases. But for closing words, I want to remind us of the prayer of St. Francis. I think we all know the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. We all know this, right? As a side comment, my middle name is Francis, and I was raised with the prayer of St. Francis displayed in a frame at my grandmother's house, and so I was named for the prayer. Anyway, so I happen to love it dearly, all right? I have an alternate prayer of St. Francis to share with us today. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I have a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek rather to do justice than to talk about it. Disturb us, O Creator, to be with as well as for the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance.